Hello, we're going to be going through question 16 of this 2023 GCSE Computer Science Python paper. This question 16 is about a dice game against a computer, similar to a card game, where you're trying to aim to reach 21 without going over 21. So it gives you information about the game, the instructions of how to play the game, and how the game ends. The first thing I notice is that the player's score starts at 0, so I'm instantly thinking you need to define a variable for the score of the player at the start. Continue to read for each turn, so I'm thinking there's going to be some sort of loop. I'm not sure what type of loop yet, because there might be a set number of goes, or there might not be, and that will depend on how the game is structured. 2 dice are rolled. The total of the dice rolls is added to the player's score. The value of each dice and the player's new total is outputted. If the current score is less than 21, the player is asked if they would like to roll the dice again. If the player says yes, they get another turn, otherwise the game ends. Alright, so this looks like it would be a while loop, which is an indefinite loop. That is because there's not a set number of goes that the user has. They could go on forever. Continuing on, at the end of the game, the program should work as follows. If the final score is 21, output a message to say the player has won. If the final score is greater than 21, output a message to say the player has lost. If the final score is less than 21, the program generates a random number between 15 and 21 inclusive. That means it can include 15 and 21 in the random numbers it generates. If this random number is greater than the player's final score, output a message to say the player has lost. Otherwise, output a message to say the player has won. And then below we get an example of how the game should work. So it tells you rolls, it tells you your score, and then asks if you would like to roll again. The example rolls again, do it again, keeps the score on from last time, adds it on, adds 1 plus 6 to 5, which equals 12, does it again to get numbers, but that goes over 21, so they lose. And then we're going to have, this is our task, to write a program to simulate this game. The dice rolls are carried out by the program generating random numbers between 1 and 6. You will need to use the Python function random.randRange brackets a, b, which generates a random number integer in the range of a to b, starting at a but finishing 1 before b. Now that's very important, because if we wanted to generate a random number between 1 and 6, we'd have to specify a to be 1 but b to be 7, because it's 1 less. You should use the indentation as appropriate, meaningful variable names and Python syntax in your answer. And then it gives us a big answer grid. Obviously 11 marks, a lot of marks, so big chunk of marks there we'll have to use for this program. As mentioned before, we will have a integer stored for the player's score. We'll also have 2 more integers stored, which are randomly generated inside the while loop. We will also need to store the result of whether the user wants to continue or end their go. Let's start writing the program. As mentioned before, we will need a variable for the player's score, and as it is a while loop, we will also need to store a state to suggest if we need to continue or not. We'll open up the while loop, and as mentioned before, a while loop is indefinite, so we will need to make sure the playing is set to false somewhere. But firstly, we'll define our first dice to be a random number between 1 and 7. As mentioned before, it needs to be 1 and 7 because random.runRange is A, but then it's 1 less than B. We'll also output it just so the user knows what the dice has been rolled. We'll do this again, but with dice 2 this time. We then need to add the two scores to the player's score using adding of integers and assignment back to it. We will then print off what the current score is. Notice the str, which converts what is an integer to a string. This means it can be concatenated with the current score string in order to be printed out correctly. We now need to check if the score is below 21. If so, we will ask the player if they would like to continue on with the game. We do that with another input with a simple question. We create a new variable here called roll again. We'll then check if roll again is equal. It is not equal to yes. This means not equal. If it is not equal, then we'll set playing to false. This will cut the loop and stop us from being able from looping back around and doing this code again. We also need to handle if the player's score is 21 or above. We'll do that with a simple else statement right here. This is the keyword selection. It either selects this or this to do. We now need to handle, once the goes have gone, whether they have won or lost the game. First of all, we'll do a simple check to see if the player's score is 21. If so, they should instantly win. We'll show this with a simple output like that. If the score is above 21, they instantly lose. So we should print that out with our you lost. Otherwise, as stated in the instructions, the dealer, aka the computer, is given a random number between 15 and 21. Remember, it's 15 and 22 because it is one less than the final input. We will then check if the dealer is above the player's score. If it is, then they lost, and if it isn't, the player wins. So this is the complete program for question 16. We'll now test if this works. We will now test it within Python, but in your real exam you will not have the ability to do this, so we will go through how to test it well on paper. Would you like to roll again? Yes, I would, because mathematically it's better to roll an 11. 17. I'm not going to roll because 17 is too close to 21 to be able to roll again. But unfortunately I still lost because the dealer must have gotten above 17, which is unfortunate. If you have time at the end of an exam, it's always best to go back and check through your code to make sure it works correctly and the logic is there. We were told that the egg could have multiple goes, which is done through this while loop. We were told to generate 2 dice rolls, which is done through this function here. We were told to add those dice rolls to the player score. We were told to output the player score, correct data type. We were also told they could roll again if the player score was below 21, which we have handled here. If they chose not to, we have broken the while loop. Handling the end of the game, if the player score is 21, you print that they won, which is correct. If not, this means else, if, just shortened, the player scores above 21, they lose, which makes sense. If neither of these are true, we go on to this part. We create a number for the dealer. If the dealer is above the player's score, the player loses. If not, the player wins. This looks all correct. That's a quick way to check your work at the end of the exam. Thank you for watching.